And earlier this week, the Supreme Court rejected the Biden administration's request to do away with a Trump-era policy, the Remain in Mexico policy. It was put in place by former President Donald Trump, and it requires asylum seekers at the southern borders to stay in Mexico while they await a hearing in the U.S. to determine their eligibility and their status. So, will President Biden be able to win this fight against a conservative Supreme Court?
Instead of having people wait here in the U.S., they made it so that people would remain in Mexico for their asylum cases. And so that meant that the U.S. would allow people to come for their court dates, but that everything else would be in Mexico. And so that meant that the government of Mexico took on the responsibility of providing some level of care, but there's no guaranteed support.
This all down, we have Vinoo Varghese, white-collar federal criminal defense and former prosecutor, also joined by Mark Davis, immigration attorney. Thank you both for joining us this afternoon to talk about the Supreme Court's decision. Now, that was Marissa Limon Garza. She's the deputy director of the nonprofit Hope Border Institute. It's in Mexico's on the U.S. or is it on Mexico or is it on the United States to provide access to health care or shelter for people seeking asylum while they're awaiting their cases to be heard? Attorney Vinoo, we'll start with you.
So the first thing to understand is that this fight isn't over for the Biden administration. They can take their appeal properly to the Fifth Circuit, the court below. All the Supreme Court did was reject the Biden administration's request for a stay of the order. That sounds complicated, but basically the lower court judge, the trial judge and federal judge in Texas had said the Biden administration had tried to undo the Trump policy in an improper way. So the Biden administration sought a stay of that, and now they lost in the Fifth Circuit, they lost in the Supreme Court for the stay, but now they can actually, what we call in the law, argue the merits. So in terms of who it should be, I think it should be both. I think it should be a responsibility of both Mexico and the United States to provide the necessities for the people seeking asylum here. I mean, that's the United States controls most of, Mexico's in North America, but controls most of South America and Central America. And so they can work with Mexico to provide what's needed for these people. And they can then decide when they do it properly, rather than fighting it in court, they should figure out a way to do it properly, and then they could totally undo the Trump policy and move these people into America as the Biden administration wants to do. And I think ultimately they'll be fine if they do it in a proper way.
All right, Attorney Davis, question for you. So what steps does the Biden administration need to take regarding the court's decision now?
Well, that's the interesting thing, because the one paragraph that the Supreme Court utilized in denying the stay didn't really provide any guidance on how to do that. And they did quote their decision in excuse me, DHS versus the University of California, where they said, that was what they had done in trying to undo DACA was arbitrary and capricious because they didn't consider certain factors. And so what the Biden administration is going to have to do is make sure that they go through step by step, showing the court that they have done a reasoned analysis of the pros and the cons, and then showing why they're coming to the decision that they need to come to. If they do that, I think that they should be okay.
All right. Attorney Vinoo, what does this decision mean for the crisis at the border? Because folks are still coming, regardless of this ruling.
Well, I don't think it changes anything. It's a question of where they're going to be housed temporarily while they try to get their asylum granted here in America or denied. So it's just a question of which side of the border they're going to be on. I mean, this was the same situation during the Trump administration. There was a similar situation during the Obama administration. Obviously, whoever's in power and whoever is in the media at the time will take the spin on it that they're going to spin. So I think the situation here is that the Biden administration should take the guidance that the United States Supreme Court gave them, that, hey, ultimately they sided with President Obama in his policy regarding DACA because the Trump administration tried to undo that improperly and did it in a way that was going to have a lasting negative effect on those people that were here since they were born, talking about DACA. So they're basically signaling to the Biden administration, listen, you can do this, just do it right, do it properly, undo it the right way, follow the steps, and they probably won't have to litigate this in court. The other option that they have, that Biden has, and I don't know if he has the political will, the support, is to try to get a law passed that takes it or makes it clear that asylum seekers can be here in America, rather than the use of this executive order or power that Obama used with DACA and that Trump used with the Stay in Mexico program. So if Biden can get a law passed, then you don't need the court.
Yeah. Attorney Davis, Attorney Varghese, as you just heard, said as long as the Biden administration takes the right steps. What are the right steps?
Again, they're going to have to make sure that they show the analysis, show why they're doing what they're doing. And you know what? There may be some other issues that they need to be concerned about, because now it's a policy shift and they have to go back to Mexico and say, hey, look, now we want you to do, the opposite of what we had you doing before. And Mexico may very well decide that, well, we'll comply with you, but we want, something else. We want maybe some of your COVID vaccinations. And now you have an issue of maybe there's separation of powers, because the appellate judge can now say, well, if you haven't complied, uh, this could be an issue. But if they don't want to comply because Mexico is making unreasonable demands, now you have some issues that the appellate division is basically more powerful than the executive branch. And so I think there are some issues. They can do it, but I think it's not going to be as easy as we all think.
Sounds like a long road ahead. All right, I got one more question for you guys because we have to wrap, unfortunately. So, Attorney Varghese, I'll ask you this. The Supreme Court dismissed, actually, I don't want to ask you that. I want to ask you, in light of the situation in Afghanistan, this reminds us that people are fleeing countries for safety reasons. With that being said, how will this decision impact those refugees who are due to come here any day, or coming as I'm speaking right now?
Well, I think it depends on where they're coming from, right? So this decision deals with Mexico or people coming from the southern border. So right now, I already know, we're aware that people are here, or already had status to be here, are already inside the United States from Afghanistan, and they'll be in other places, whether in the Gulf, whether in Europe. I'm not sure if that has a direct this decision or the denial of the stay will have a direct impact on those coming from Afghanistan.
And welcome back to BNC Live. If you're just joining us, we've been following that breaking news out of Afghanistan. That's where it's been an explosion, better yet two, one outside the Kabul airport, another outside of the Barron Hotel not far from the airport. A U.S. official says the attack is definitely believed to have been carried out by the Islamic State group. Now, we spoke to someone earlier. They described it as ISIS-K. This is a video of an injured person being taken to the hospital. The Pentagon press secretary, John Kirby, described it as a complex attack that resulted in a number of U.S. and civilian casualties. Now, we just got an alert that the U.S. ambassador in Kabul, Ross Wilson, telling staff 4 Marines were killed in that explosion. 3 were wounded. NATO Secretary General also citing 60 people were wounded there. Now, an official also confirming that there were at least an additional explosion. I mentioned that earlier to you outside the Barron Hotel. That's a short distance from that airport. This is while thousands are trying to flee that country. We go to our BNC Foreign Affairs correspondent, Naira Huck. She has the latest for us. She joins us later, better yet. With that being said, we go back to our guest. We were discussing the Supreme Court deciding to uphold that Trump-era policy, keeping migrants in Mexico. So thank you, attorneys, for joining us, or staying with us, better yet, Attorney Varghese and also Attorney Davis. I want to ask you both one last question. Attorney Varghese, the Supreme Court dismissed the case in June after a request from the Biden administration. Do you think they'll weigh in on this?
They'll weigh in on, I'm sorry, I didn't catch you.
Do you think, can you hear me now?
Yes, the
Got it.
weigh in on which
On this
part.
decision,
Sorry.
how will we move forward?
The they're going to try to figure out a way to get this right and do what they want to do with their foreign policy. And my colleague was talking about how a judge could dictate foreign policy and become more powerful. There's a separation of powers issue. Whether that's accurate or not, that's the same argument that Trump used while he was president, when different judges around the countries would put stays to his what they call a so-called Muslim ban, and they said, how is it that a single judge sitting in wherever he was, whatever part of the country, San Francisco or Virginia, could put an end to what the president was doing, at least temporarily. So that's the same argument that Biden is using with regards to this judge in Texas who stopped the Biden administration from turning around Trump's policy.
All right, perfect. I'm glad you heard that answer. And my question, good answer. All right, so last question will be for you, Attorney Davis. Considering the U.S. is being viewed on the world stage, it's not being viewed in a very good light. That's what one of our guests actually mentioned, a counterterrorism expert, Brian Boyd. Because of their handling of Afghanistan, how do you think this decision will impact foreign policy and our international relationships?
I don't know that it's going to have that big of an impact, this particular decision. At the end of the day, there are countries across the world who are trying to figure out ways to get the Afghani uh, civilians that are trying to escape into their country. And certainly the pullout of our forces in Afghanistan was somewhat clunky, but there was never going to be an easy way to do that. So at the end of the day, the United States is going to have to figure out how to get those people that they want out of Afghanistan here. They're also going to have to pull together a policy that is clear so that when they make their arguments to the Supreme Court, which I think this particular case may end up there, that they've laid out in very, very clear form how it is they've come to the determinations that they've come to, so that the court can look at it and say, okay, procedurally, you guys have done things correctly, and therefore we're going to uphold your decisions.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. It seems the Biden administration has their hands full, to say the least, from the border crisis to the crisis unfolding right now in Afghanistan. Thank you both for joining us.